Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you today about something that has paralyzed more lives than poverty or disease, worry. And more importantly, I want to share with you how to crowd worry out of your mind. You see, I've spent a lifetime studying people, what troubles them, what uplifts them. And I've found again and again that one of the simplest, most powerful remedies for worry is this: get busy, stay busy, be so occupied. Worry simply has no room to live. Let me tell you a story that I shall never forget. A few years ago, a gentleman named Marion J. Douglas came to one of my classes. Now, that's not his real name. He asked me not to reveal it, but his story, his truth, left an impression on every soul in that room. Marion told us how tragedy had visited his home not once, but twice. First, he and his wife lost their 5-year-old daughter, a child they adored. It broke their hearts, but then, just 10 months later, God gave them another little girl, and who died within 5 days. He told us, I couldn't take it, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. My nerves were utterly shaken, and my confidence gone. He tried doctors, sleeping pills, a trip, but nothing worked. He said it felt as though his body was gripped in a vice, and the jaws were being twisted tighter and tighter by the day. But you see, he had one child left, a 4-year-old boy. And one afternoon, while Marion sat drowning in grief, that little boy walked up to him and said, "Daddy, will you build a boat for me?" Now, Marion wasn't in the mood to build a boat. He wasn't in the mood to do anything. But his son was persistent, like most little boys are, and finally he gave in. He spent the next 3 hours building that boat, and do you know what he discovered? Those were the first 3 hours of peace he had felt in months. He told us, building that toy boat gave me something to think about. To focus on. It pushed worry out of my mind. It was the first real rest my mind had had in all that time. That moment, he said, changed everything. He began to understand something that we too often forget. You cannot worry while your mind is actively engaged in constructive work. He started looking for things to do, anything. One night, he went around the house and made a list of everything that needed fixing: a leaky faucet, a loose doorknob, window shades. In just 2 weeks, he found 242 things that needed attention. He repaired most of them, and in the process, he repaired himself. He filled his life with civic activities. He took adult education classes twice a week in New York, became chairman of his local school board, raised funds for the Red Cross. His calendar filled up, and his worry vanished. And now you might say, that's a personal story, Dale, and it is. But it's not just a story, it's a universal principle, because Marion wasn't the only man who found peace in purposeful action. Sir Winston Churchill, yes, the very man who bore the weight of Britain during World War II, was once asked if he worried. He said, "I'm too busy. I have no time for worry." And the great inventor, Charles Kettering, when he was working to develop the self-starter for cars, he was so absorbed in his mission that he never had the luxury of worry, even when money was tight and his wife was giving piano lessons to make ends meet. His wife once said, "I couldn't sleep for worry." But Charles wasn't worried. He was too absorbed in his work. You see, that's the key. Deep involvement, total mental engagement, crowds out anxiety like sunlight, drives away shadows. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to think about 2 things at once? Try it right now. Close your eyes and think at the very same instant about the Statue of Liberty and your plans for tomorrow morning. You can switch between them, yes, but you can't hold them both in your mind simultaneously. That's not just theory, that's psychology, and it's one of the most fundamental laws ever discovered. The human mind can only focus on one thing at a time. And just like thoughts, emotions follow the same rule. You cannot feel enthusiastic and worried at the same moment. One must displace the other. Now here's the thing, friends. Most of us can keep worry at bay when we're at work. When we've got our noses to the grindstone, hands occupied, heads engaged, we're fine. But the danger creeps in after work. That's when we're supposed to relax, enjoy our evening, savor a bit of peace. But instead, those blue devils of worry sneak in the back door. That's when we start thinking, am I getting anywhere in life? Was the boss serious about what he said today? Am I stuck in a rut? Am I going bald? You know the feeling. It's the quiet hours, those empty spaces, when our minds, if we're not careful, turn into a vacuum. And nature, as you may recall from your high school physics class, abhors a vacuum. You break a light bulb, whoosh, the air rushes in to fill the emptiness, and the same thing happens in our minds. When our thoughts are unoccupied, something will rush in. And more often than not, it's not serenity, it's fear, anger, envy, self-doubt. You see, emotions like worry and fear are primal. They're powered by the jungle inside us. They're strong, they're loud, and they don't ask permission before barging in. Dr. James L. Mersell of Columbia University put it perfectly. He said, "Worry is most apt to ride you ragged, not when you're in action, but when the day's work is done." He called it a motor running without a load. And you know what happens to a motor like that? It spins out of control. It can burn itself out. So what's the cure? Same as before. Get completely occupied doing something constructive. That's not a lofty idea. That's daily medicine, and anyone can apply it. Let me tell you a story about a woman I met on a train. She and her husband were sitting across from me in the dining car, headed west from New York toward Missouri. I wish I had gotten her name. I prefer giving names and street addresses, but I can still tell you what she told me. Her son had joined the Army the day after Pearl Harbor, and she began to unravel with worry. Where was he? Was he safe? Was he even alive? She nearly wrecked her health fretting over her only boy. And when I asked her how she pulled herself out of that pit, do you know what she said? I got busy. At first she thought doing the housework herself would help. She let go of her maid and filled her day with chores, but it wasn't enough. She said, the trouble was I could do my housework almost mechanically without using my mind, so I kept on worrying. So she took a job, not just any job, a saleswoman at a large department store. Now suddenly she was on her feet all day, customers asking for sizes, colors, prices. She told me I didn't have a second to think of anything except the next thing in front of me. And by the time I got home, I was too tired to worry. I ate dinner and fell straight into bed. That job did more for her peace of mind than all the rest she could have taken in a year. And what she discovered is something that John Cowper Powys once put beautifully. He said, a certain comfortable security, a certain profound inner peace, a kind of happy numbness soothes the nerves of the human animal when absorbed in its allotted task. And thank God it does. Let me tell you one more story about a woman who lived through real tragedy. Her name was Osa Johnson. You may have heard of her. She was the most famous woman explorer in the world. She married adventure, literally. When she was just 16, she married Martin Johnson. Together, they traveled across the wild trails of Borneo and Africa, filming endangered wildlife, living among the unknown. But tragedy struck. One winter, while on a lecture tour back in America, their plane went down in the mountains. Martin was killed on impact. The doctors said Osa would never leave her bed again, but they didn't know Osa. 3 months later, she was in a wheelchair, lecturing, not once, not twice, but over 100 times that season. When I asked her why she pushed herself like that, she said, I did it so that I would have no time for sorrow and worry. You see, friends, what Osa discovered is what Tennyson understood more than a century ago when he lost his dearest friend. He said, I must lose myself in action, lest I wither in despair. And that's a truth we can all take with us, not just in great tragedy, but in the little worries of daily life. Because the mind, left idle, invites trouble. But the mind that's engaged, focused, and in motion, that mind can know peace. Admiral Richard Byrd, he learned the same truth too. He discovered it at the very ends of the earth, buried in the frozen silence of the South Pole. For 5 months, Admiral Byrd lived completely alone, deep beneath the surface of a continent larger than the United States and Europe combined. An ice-covered land that holds nature's oldest secrets. No human contact, no animals, no sound except the eerie hiss of the wind and the surreal moment when he could hear his breath freeze as it passed his ears. In his book, Alone, Admiral Byrd shares how he survived that soul-crushing isolation. Each night before blowing out the lantern, he planned his next day in detail. An hour for this, half an hour for that, shoveling, fixing, organizing, assigning every moment a purpose. He said, it brought me an extraordinary sense of command over myself. And here's the line that stays with me. Without purpose, the days would have ended, as such days always end, in disintegration. Let that sink in. No matter where we are, in a frozen wilderness or the warmth of our own home, Without purpose, we crumble. And the antidote? That same old friend. Work, activity, purposeful motion. Dr. Richard Cabot, professor of clinical medicine at Harvard, once said that work cured people who suffered from what he called trembling palsy of the soul, fear, doubt, paralysis. He said, courage given us by our work is like the self-reliance Emerson made forever glorious, because when you're occupied, truly engaged, you don't have time to feed your fear. You starve the worry out. If we sit and brood, we don't just worry. We hatch a whole flock of what Darwin used to call the Wibber gibbers. And the Wibber gibbers, they're just the old gremlins of fear and doubt that gnaw away at your will and leave you hollow. Let me tell you about a man I know who beat the Wibber gibbers. His name is Tremper Longman. His office is in New York at 40 Wall Street. He was a student in one of my adult education classes, and his story was so remarkable, I invited him to dinner after class. We talked long past midnight. Many years ago, Tremper thought he was headed for a breakdown. He was tense, anxious, and couldn't sleep. He was treasurer of a company with $500,000 in unsellable strawberries, stuck in outdated packaging. Sales dried up overnight. They owed the banks $350,000. Worse still, they were under contract to buy another $1 million in berries. He flew out to California to stop the bleeding. He managed to convince the company to pivot, sell fresh berries to the San Francisco market. It helped, but he still couldn't stop worrying, because worry is a habit, and Tremper had it bad. So what did he do? He got busy. He didn't work 7 hours a day anymore. He worked 16. He showed up at 8 a.m. and stayed until almost midnight. He took on more duties, more responsibilities. He pushed himself until he collapsed into bed every night, too exhausted to worry. And after 3 months of that, he broke the habit. The worry lost its grip. He returned to a normal schedule and never suffered from insomnia or anxious worry again. That was years ago. Tremper Longman taught me something. Sometimes the best way out isn't around or over. It's through the fire, through the pressure, through the work. And finally, let me leave you with the words of George Bernard Shaw. The secret of being miserable is to have the leisure to bother about whether you are happy or not. So don't overthink it. Don't sit still and stew. Spit on your hands and get busy. Your blood will start to flow. Your mind will begin to tick. And that vital surge of life will drive out the fog of fear. So here's rule number 1 to break the worry habit. Keep busy. The worried person must lose themselves in action, lest they wither in despair. If this message resonated with you, don't just click away and forget it. Take a breath, look at your day, and ask yourself, what can I get busy with right now that brings me purpose? Because the best way to clear your mind isn't thinking harder, it's doing something that matters. Thanks so much for watching. If this helped you, consider liking or sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more thoughtful content like this, you know what to do. Until next time, stay grounded, stay moving, and don't let the Wibber gibbers win.